Hello, folks. So today I'm going to discuss a different topic, something I've been meaning to talk about for a while now, and that is Dushtana houses, the 6, 8, 12 houses in your chart. There's so much to talk about in this area, but I'm going to limit it and talk about the houses themselves and why they're called the houses of suffering. I'm also going to attempt to kind of like give some practical solutions where you can manage this energy better. Yeah. So let's get into this. Okay, first of all, as usual, what is Dushtana? Dush, or if you're a Hindi speaker, dukh in Hindi, simply means suffering. Stan is simply place, or in this case, we're talking about house. We're talking about the houses in a chart. So, Dushtana house is house of suffering. What is suffering anyway? It's when you don't get your desires met, right? You don't get your needs met, even more so. That's a different kind of suffering than the wants not being met. And life just simply looks very different from your expectations. Of course, suffering is a fact of life, right? Irrespective of who you are. In fact, it's the first of Gautama Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Right? He says, the first thing that he says is life is suffering. Now, there's 3 types of suffering that we talk about in the Vedantic philosophy, in the scriptures, also known as 3 types of miseries. The first is called adhibhautik, the things that are purely material in nature, like it's a desk in front of you, it's a car that's passing by. So you don't have access to these things that make life more comfortable, that make life more easier. And this causes suffering and misery. The second is adhidaivik. Adhidaivik is, they are material in nature as well, but you can't make sense of them. So you attribute it to God or nature. Or universe. I think universe is like the contemporary term. It's basically purely physical phenomena, such as a flood, or earthquake, a famine, a hurricane, right? So you say, yes, I'm suffering, but it's in no one's control because this happened. And my suffering is a result of that, right? And of course, people, we're witnessing that in the world with the war going on in Europe, right, with Ukraine, and so that's the second type of misery. The third type is called adhyatmic. Now, adhyatmic is where you really become aware of it, actually. It's when you have everything in abundance, but you still feel unfulfilled. And that's when spirituality really starts for you. The adhyatmic path. Yeah. This is basically that inner angst right? For most of us, of course, it's the outward suffering, the first two, that's more painful. But when you get to this stage, when you're feeling that number, like this type of suffering where you have everything but you're unfulfilled, in a way that's even more painful. But this is when you start to question life and really sets you on the spiritual path. Now, to understand the essence of suffering, we need to understand the relationship with you and the world. Essentially, the relationship of the sufferer with the world. This is the real exploration. What is the right relationship to have with the world? What is the right relationship to have with other people? Also important to understand is the relationship between you and nature, right? Purusha and Prakriti. That's part of this. And it's the Vedantic philosophy that explores this relationship itself. If this relationship is imbalanced, then you suffer. What happens is that most people are not aware, like they don't get to that number 3, because what they do is they accept the suffering on the first 2 levels, especially on the second level. Everybody does. It's not in your control. They say, I'm suffering. Everyone else around me is suffering. And they continue to just surround themselves with others like themselves. To overcome suffering, though, you have to be a little bit rebellious, in the sense that you need to you need to see how to go beyond that everyone else, that status quo. You need to learn to accept yourself, and you need to get out of this space. In this way, you don't accept the crumbs of life, the crumbs that life offers or the crumbs that other people offer, because you see yourself as immense. So, getting back to the topic at hand. Now, this is the ultimate challenge with the Dushtana houses. The inability to love and accept yourself, which is the 6th house suffering. The inability to connect with yourself on a deeper level, which is the 12th house suffering. And then your imbalances in relationships, the imbalances of the relationship you have with the outer world, the imbalance of the relationship you have with nature, the inability to connect with nature. That's that 8th house suffering. Right. So let's tackle the 6th house first. Now, first thing to understand about the suffering of the 6th house is that here we can exercise some control to change the situation. Unlike the 8th and 12th houses, because with the 8th and 12th houses, we're relying on others also. They're very much connected that way, right? Yet, the 6th house is more malefic than the 8th and the 12th house. If the 6th lord is sitting with a planet, then it will damage that planet. It will also, to some extent, strip away and weaken the planet that it aspects as well. Whereas the 8th and 12th lord, sitting with a planet, to some extent, will inherit the qualities of the planet that it sits with. Yes? So if this planet that it's sitting with is a benefic planet for you, then it reduces the ability of the 8th and 12th lord to harm. So what am I talking about here? For those who have actually studied Jyotish to some extent, this is the rule from Laghuparashara, right? The 2nd, 8th, and 12th lord will bestow the results according to their association with other planets and the other house that they rule. And we know this to be correct because, for instance, for Leo ascendant, Jupiter is considered benefic, even though it rules the 8th house, because it also rules the 5th house. And it would be similar if Jupiter was sitting with the sun, conjunct the sun, even if it didn't rule the fifth house, and it ruled the eighth house, but sitting next to the sun. So again, it will decrease the ability to harm. That sun will decrease the ability to harm, of Jupiter's ability to harm. For Aries, another example, Mars rules the eighth house, but also the ascendant, right? So again, it's considered a good planet. So in this way, the sixth house and the sixth lord are more malefic than the eighth and the 12th house and lord, because its nature remains malefic, and it just simply harms the planet that it sits beside. It doesn't take on the qualities of that planet. It harms that planet. Now let's talk more about the sixth house signification. Sixth house can bring the most amount of suffering because you feel like you have control over it. And you do, to some extent, have control over it. And that's what causes the anxiety and the stress and the angst. You'll always work hard to improve that area of your life. And most definitely, you will ultimately improve it. This is the boon of the sixth house, and therefore it's also called the Upachaya house, right? It gets better with time. It will improve over time. You will know how to handle it over time also, to your benefit. Simply because you put so much energy and work into it, right? But the frustration and agony it brings is difficult to deal with because it will feel as though you're getting nowhere. You are chasing perfection. You are striving for more achievement. But the outcomes are so ordinary despite your extraordinary efforts. So what are the significations of the sixth house? Well, it governs daily habits, routines, work life, health, healing, disputes, court cases, litigation, strife, conflict, problems. But problems of all kinds. That's sixth house. And despite continuously striving, you constantly run into obstacles and problems. When you finally overcome them, the award is nowhere near the effort that you seem to have put into it. So this results in suffering and angst and frustration. On the extreme end, sixth is also addictions. It's substance abuse. Because if you lack the strength to deal with these problems, if the sixth house is weak, sixth lord is weak, you'll finally surrender to the problems and try to escape. You'll try to escape them through addictions, through substance abuse, right? Six is also the six Shadripus. The Shadripus is what? The internal evils of the mind that you will fight during the dasha of the sixth house, or lord. These six Shadripus bind the soul to the cycle of birth and death, and thus they're operating from a subconscious level, from the place where life delivers seemingly fated outcomes. So if you have a powerful sixth house or a powerful sixth lord, then your goal may very well be, on a subconscious level perhaps, to overcome these Shadripus. Briefly, let's discuss what they are. Lust is the first one. Lust, desire, sensual pleasure, also known as kama. The second is krodh, which is anger. The third is lobha, which is greed. And then fourth is delusion, infatuation, also known as moha. And then from that comes mada, or pride. And finally, there's matsarya, which is envy, which is jealousy. It's a cycle that keeps repeating. It starts with us strongly identifying with the external world. This world we live in, which essentially is delusion, is maya. Consequently, you ignore the inner consciousness, the soul. This leads to a state of arrogance or pride, which is mada. To stay in this state, you indulge in kama, which is desire. And as these desires get fulfilled, more desires take birth, thereby creating greed, which is lobha. At some point, the failures and the inability to fulfill new desires leads to anger, which is growth. And then the mind starts to envy others, and then this cycle repeats again and again. Sixth house dashas will take the joy away from life, the juice of life, the sweetness of life, because you'll be so engrossed in managing the day-to-day affairs of life simply for the sake of survival. And this is why it's also the house from where we see poverty, from where we see underprivileged people and their lives. So either you are helping those that are lower, like in class, in social status, whatever it is, either you're helping them, the underprivileged, or you're getting helped yourself. And this is where we see the harshness of life, where you are struggling, you're worried about survival, having the basic necessities. And this is where the suffering lies, right? You're because you see life in its barest form, in its ugliest form. But here, you also have the chance to overcome it. And over time, this house does give better results. If it's a strong sixth house or a strong sixth house ruler, then you will gain strength. And with this, you will learn to simplify life for the better. You will learn to detach from that which is just not necessary. The most common remedy that is given for the sixth house is Sevite, selfless service. And according to me, this is actually a good remedy for every problem, because if you can find those that are suffering more than you, then it lightens your suffering, because it gives you perspective. Like, not only are you creating value for them, making their life better in some way, but you also see the big picture then, right? You don't get so engrossed in your own suffering, your own problems. The trick also with the sixth house is to let go of attachments of what that planet signifies. Let go of expectations connected to the planet in the sixth house, or see what else the sixth house ruler embodies. Right? The other lesson with the sixth house problems is to learn to live in the present. And I would say that this is the best teaching of the sixth house and the sixth lord, is to learn to be in the present, to accept that which you cannot change, to accept that which you cannot change, to have the courage to change that which you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This is also, in fact, the serenity prayer. And it's a fantastic remedy for the sixth house. And incidentally, this prayer is used for those who have addiction problems. Like if you go and seek help, if you've had addiction problems and you go and seek help, there are groups that use this prayer. Spiritual practice will ultimately give you that wisdom to know the difference there. Basic good habits and rituals you develop over time and do every day, like repetition, right? Sixth house is repetition. That will also help you overcome the sixth house problems. Having discipline routine is another lesson of the sixth house and Lord. It's the only way to overcome the challenges and obstacles. Again, taking one day at a time. Living in the present. That's what it is. The ultimate lesson is living in the present with the sixth house problems, actually. So what about the 12th house? 12th house is what? Bedroom pleasures. It's sexual encounters. It's hidden things. Anything hidden. Hidden enemies as well. It is spirituality, foreign lands, multinational companies. It's isolation. It's imprisonment, which is a form of isolation. It's a house of losses. Loss of stuff. Loss of yourself. In fact, the 12th house dasha or planet it will want to take you into isolation. Because after all, going into isolation will take you closer to moksha, right? This is why it's also the house of meditation. If there's a malefic sitting in that 12th house and you're going through the dasha of that planet, well, then you may go into isolation because people have betrayed you. And you say, you know what, I'm fed up. I'm fed up with the world. And so in this way, that malefic planet dasha will take you into isolation. And of course, if it's a benefic sitting there, perhaps it's an easier transition. Maybe it's more by choice. I meditate for 20 minutes a day, and that's my choice. I go on a retreat every 4 months up in the mountains. That's my choice. Like that sort of thing. So what are some of the remedies of the 12th house, of the 12th lord? If you have this planet's dasha, then give your energy away somehow. Like, so before you suffer the losses, give stuff away. Give to those who are suffering more than you, again. Some kind of sacrifice. Don't hang on to things that you need. Don't hang on to things that you don't need. Like, that can be anything in your house. Reduce the clutter. Do charitable acts. Sacrifice your time in some way. Idea is basically to give away something. It could be time, it could be energy. It could be things. And certainly it could be things that we don't really necessarily want to give away. But you know that you don't need it. And so therefore you give it away. This will balance out the losses that you experience. You could give donation to others. You could give your time, energy, money, anything. This will lessen the blow of the losses that you will suffer. Of course, going to ashrams and doing meditation retreats or moving to a foreign country. Twelfth house remedy. And of course, when you do that service, don't expect any acknowledgement. Surrender also becomes important when things seem beyond your control. Prayer, meditation, great remedy. That's a great remedy also for the 12th house. But essentially it's like giving away in some form or another. So 8th house. What happens with the 8th house? Well, 8th house, you can be overwhelmed with fears, anxieties, obsessions, and really deep-seated fears that can just grip you. The deepest fear for a human being is death. And so 8th house is the house of death and rebirth. Here, when you experience the dasha of the planet, right, the planet sitting in the 8th house or the 8th lord, an inner death will take place somehow. You will die in some way, and then you will come alive again in a different way. And that's when you actually feel like you're born for the first time. The real transformation occurs. This is anyway the goal of spirituality, right? The inner death, the inner destruction. 8th house will bring transformation from chaos. You'll have a problem with planets here if you have a controlling nature. The objective is transformation, so you need to die. You need to be born again. You need to let go in order for that to happen. Your life will somehow go through a 180-degree change. So you probably won't let go on your own volition. It will just happen. And that's the 8th house energy. If 8th lord or the 8th house contains a benefic, it will be more manageable and for the better. It will still shake things up. So, but somehow you will know with full faith that this change, no matter how difficult it is, it's in the end, it's for your better, even if it doesn't seem that way. But irrespective of the planet there, the objective is death and rebirth. For example, you could have 8th Lord in 10th house, then this is the death of your career as you know it. And you need to reinvent your career in some way, for instance. Right? You may experience this cycle more than once, this death and rebirth cycle. Now, if you have a guru, which signifies the 9th house, then this guru has the power to take you out of this constant death and rebirth cycle. So this is an excellent remedy for 8th house problems. 8th house is basically very deep attachments and bonds. Right? This is why we say when you have a malefic in the 8th house, it's difficult to create a deep bond in marriage. It can result in obsessive attractions and intimacy as well. 8th house is also past life repercussions. See what planet it is. Deep karma is connected to the ruler of the 8th house. So it'll bring suffering through the person connected to that planet. But unfortunately, you won't be able to change it. This is the problem with the 8th house manifestation. You have to surrender to it because it signifies past life karma. No action you take now will change it. Unlike the 6th house, where actions can modify results to some extent, here you don't have any control whatsoever. 8th house in the ruling planet will also create a deep longing for that which it signifies. So see the natural karaka of that 8th house ruler to understand. There'll be a deep frustration that you don't have this thing. Revenge will come also in the form of planets. That's it, in the 8th house. There's also a deep-seated fear here. So overcoming fear, anxiety will be your biggest evolution if you can do it. Surrender and acceptance are really the only options. You can try anything else, but it probably won't work for very long. The other thing is, don't go outside of the convention, even though it will be very tempting to do that with 8th house, especially having illicit affairs, extramarital affairs. It's even more so if Jupiter or Venus are sitting in the 8th or ruling the 8th. The other things you can do is abstain from eating meat, because in this way you're showing respect to all living entities. Abstain from drug, alcohol. But don't go outside of as I said before, don't go outside of the convention too much. And more specifically, stay away from doing things that are unethical and cause suffering to others. So what, 8th is 12th from the 9th. And now 9th is the house of dharma, right? Dharma is basically your duty, it's doing the right thing. And so the loss of that is what we're talking about here, essentially. So even if you experience constant themes of death and rebirth, just be with it, and it can result in a complete transformation for the better. Regeneration for the better. But because of that 9th house connection, 8th being 12th from 9th, and loss of the 9th. As I mentioned, the best remedy really is to have a guru. Be part of a spiritual community to strengthen that 9th house. So that's all for now, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, feel free to leave your comments. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. All the best.